Hello and welcome, all you fabulous fighting fantasy aficionados, to my third and last episode for now about this book. This is The Warlock of Firetop Mountain, the book that started the fighting fantasy franchise and also arguably the first proper game book in history. Um, this is my aftermath episode where I do a little bit of analysis and some calculations as well about how this book is in terms of winning chances, how it is as a game. A few interesting observations already. Because I played these books completely out of order now, I started with book number 50. I went to number 13 and number 9, and then I do number 1 now. One thing that struck me right away when I started reading this again for the first time in a really long time is that it's written in a slightly different way. What I mean by that is that, well, obviously they were making it up as they went along. Steve Jackson, Ian Livingstone, the writers of these books or of this book, um, they were inventing the system as they were writing the book. And therefore, there are some slight inconsistencies of style, not just because of the two writers, but also, I think, because they didn't know exactly how to structure things in the best possible way yet. Compared to the later books, I think there's actually more in common in style-wise between number 9 and number 50. Because in this one, sometimes paragraphs are long, and by that I mean they're very long. There's one in particular. Let's see if I can find it now. Because it has a lot of stuff in it that normally would have been spread over several paragraphs in later books. For instance, most of the luck rolls you make in this book, when you test your luck, the result is already in the same paragraph. So it tells you if you're lucky, this happens, and you go to that paragraph. Or maybe you don't go to a paragraph, and then if you're unlucky, you go to this happens, and you go to another paragraph, or you don't. So, whereas in the later books, excuse me, every time you test your luck, it says if you're lucky, go to this paragraph. If you're unlucky, go to this paragraph, very consistently. So that's something that wasn't quite sorted out yet. Yes, 350 is a really long paragraph. I'll just read it out and you'll see what I mean. This is I'll just do a bit of background. This is when you've gone through about half the dungeon, as it were, and you'll get to the river. And one of the ways you can cross it is by swimming, or also there are other ways of crossing it that can cause you to fall into the water. And if you do, there is a chance that this can happen. So as the turbulence surrounds you, you can feel the dustlings of many small fish. They start ripping your flesh with vicious bites, and you realize that you are surrounded by deadly piranhas. If, during your struggle with a crocodile, this is after you've actually fought a crocodile as well, if during your struggle with a crocodile you have wounded it, you are lucky and most of the fish attack the bleeding reptile. If you have not wounded the crocodile, then the fish may go for either you or it. Throw one die. If you throw a 1 or 2, the majority of the piranhas go for you. If you throw a 3 to 6, the majority attack the crocodile. Treat the piranhas as a single creature. If, as a result of the above, the majority of the fish attack you, the scores are piranhas, skill 5, stamina 5. If, as a result of the above, the majority attack the crocodile and the remainder attack you, they have piranhas, skill 5, stamina 1. If you win, you can swim to shore, turn to 7. You may eat provisions here and restore 1 luck point. So this is so much information in one paragraph that normally in the later ways of writing these books, that would have been at least 4 paragraphs. Okay, that's one thing. Another thing I noticed very early on is that you get a lot of skill points in this game book. I mean, there are many places in the game where you're told you win a battle and you gain 2 luck points and you gain 1 skill point. they're all over the place, but there's hardly anywhere you can lose skill points. And of course, the system as it is in the book, in the rules, is you can never get a skill higher than your initial score. Excuse me, unless otherwise stated, which is very unusual. There is actually 1 point in this book where you can get a higher than initial skill score, 1 point, and one of the few points in the whole of the series. But it sort of indicates to me that maybe when the book was written, which I know when they were writing it, they still hadn't ironed out the combat system, the ability system. They didn't know if it was going to be skill 2 to 12 or 12 to 24, things like that. And I think that the skill points you get as bonuses after winning battles were originally perhaps intended to be a kind of sort of experience point or leveling up system where your skill actually could get higher than the initial score. Because there's no point doing it. I mean, as long as there's no way you could have lost skill points, awarding skill points makes absolutely no sense. So it's one of those things that really should have been removed in editing, I think, for all the places where you can't really have lost skill points before getting to it. And of course, there are hardly any places where you can lose skill points in this book. There are a few, just a few, and of course you could easily regain the skill afterwards, because there are so many places you can lose them. Another interesting thing about this book, I know lots of people, they go on about how the later in Livingstone books in particular, how they have so many places of insta-death. Now in this book, there are actually hardly anywhere you can take a wrong turning that makes you die. Actually, I don't think there are any, in fact. The only places you can die, or you can obviously die in combat, but you can, there are 2 battles, excuse me, where you have sort of special things happening that can cause you to die in other ways. There's a vampire you meet, and of course a combination of bad luck and bad choices can cause you to get seduced by the vampire, and he bites you, and the game is over. And then there is a ghoul, which has the power to paralyze you. So that's also special rules combat, where after a certain number of combat rounds, if he's wounded you, excuse me. Dry throat this morning again. Sorry about that. Pollen season. I'm quite sure it's pollen season. Yes, the ghoul. If it injures you a certain number of times, it will paralyze you, and you're still alive, but the game is over. And it's quite a vivid paragraph you get to if that happens. So structure-wise, because of this, because there are no dead ends, and because there are no insta-deaths, almost no matter what you do in this book, when you play it, you do get to the end game. You do get to the Warlock himself, and you have to do battle with him in whatever way you are able to with what you've picked up on the way, or just fight him outright. So that's one thing. Another interesting thing in this book is, of course, the keys. At the end, which you're quite likely to get to if you play it safe, there is a chest, a treasure chest, and you are supposed to unlock it with 3 keys. And in the game there are... Ooh, how many keys are there again now? Let's see, is it 6 or 5? 5, 6. Hang on. I'll forget this now. I was writing this down on a piece of paper because I was trying to calculate the different combinations, and now yes, there are 6 keys scattered throughout the game, and only one combination of 3 keys is the correct one to unlock the treasure chest at the end. Of course, if you take the correct path for finding the correct keys, you are quite likely to get those keys, and you won't have too many other ones, because some of the other keys are actually in the, well, wrong path. I call them wrong paths, but in a way, the wrong paths are actually quite interesting here, and you should really take those 2 in different playthroughs just to see what they're like. There are 6 keys, 2 of them have the same number, so there's actually just 14 different combinations of keys. But there's a very interesting thing that one of my viewers pointed out to me, that there is a because at the end, when you have the keys ready and you're told add the numbers on the keys together, go to that paragraph, and if you go to that paragraph, it directs you to another paragraph, and that paragraph tells you that you got no correct keys, the game is over. You got one correct key, and then there's some kind of trap, and you got two correct keys, and there's also some kind of trap that is triggered by the fact that you tried the wrong key. And then there's a combination that says one. They go into the lock and they click one by one, and then you open a treasure chest and go to this paragraph, which is where you get to 400 and you win the game. But there is an orphan paragraph, and by an orphan I mean there is a paragraph that you can't get to in absolutely any way following the reading the book or trying keys. In this case, there is a paragraph 192, which is not a sum of any combination of keys, but it's there nevertheless. And if you go to it, it says go to paragraph 169, I think, which is the one where you have the correct combination of keys for winning the game. So there are two possibilities there. We discussed this a little bit on in the comment section on my previous video. Either it's left there deliberately as a sort of an anti-cheat trap. For instance, if you are at the end of the game and you don't know what combination of keys you're looking for and you try to cheat, you might want to leaf through the book to see if you can find the the number that will lead you to page 400 and paragraph 400 and victory. And you will get to 192 a lot sooner than you get to the correct number. That's one possibility, but I don't think that's very likely, actually. A lot more likely because of the way this book was written, because Ian Livingstone did one part, Steve Jackson did another part. Of course, they had to coordinate some things to do with the keys and paragraph numbers and things. But even so, I think that if they changed something along the way, which is quite likely, I know they changed combat system to an extent that I think that the skill points are all over the place, which is a bit it's a bit daft, to be honest. I know they did that. There's quite a high likelihood, I think, of the number of keys and therefore the numbers on the keys having changed as well during the making of writing of this game or during editing. I mean, 6 keys, it's quite a lot. I'm thinking perhaps when they started writing it, maybe they thought, oh, just leave 3 keys, and then we add maybe 1 red herring, and then at some point they decided to add 3 red herrings or three keys that don't actually work. So I'm thinking 192 was an earlier combination of differently numbered keys that just got left in, because if you proofread this, it is the easiest thing to miss. Not only is it easy to miss because it's a very small paragraph, it's correctly written, it references a paragraph that does exist, and also there's no paragraph going to it. So if you flowchart the game, which is what I do when I map it out, and if you flowchart it without counting paragraphs, you wouldn't know there was a paragraph missing. I mean, if you flowcharted it starting at number 1 and just going through all the paragraphs that you get to, you would have 399 paragraphs on your flowchart, but unless you count them, you wouldn't know there was one missing. And once you know one is missing, you have to actually cross them off a list 1 to 400 to find out which one is missing. So it's a lot of work, and it's very hard to spot. You wouldn't spot it if you weren't looking for it. So I think that is actually more likely that it's something that was left over in editing based on a previous version in the early drafts. So yeah, paragraph 192 is an orphan, and I think it's quite nice to have an orphan in a book like this. I'm actually going to be looking out for orphans now in these books because they can easily happen. I know especially the later ones, the editing is a bit, well, sloppy, to be honest. There aren't that many sort of editing mistakes in this one. I mean, there are some inconsistencies of style, like the really long paragraphs, and then there are paragraphs that are really short, that are actually quite pointless, where it just says go to You go somewhere and you go told to go to the next paragraph again, without any good reason for it. I think there are a few places like that. Also, a lot of the going back, because in this book is structured very much in a sort of traditional Dungeons and Dragons dungeon style. You walk down your corridor, there's a door. Do you want to check out the door? You want to open the door? If not, then you go back. You go inside the door, and once you're inside the door and see what's there, you're often given the option of going back again. It's a sort of it's a good old classic dungeon crawl game, which clearly inspired by Dungeons and Dragons and the sort of early scenarios you used to get for Dungeons and Dragons. What more was it? Which also means it's very easy to map this game in a way, because of you can actually map it as a physical, geographical, or floor plan map of a dungeon quite easily. Whereas many of the other books, it's easier to map them as a flowchart. Of course, I'm mapping as a flowchart because when I'm making my maps, because it's just how I structure things, and because then I get all the paragraphs, all the possibilities of that can happen are sort of structured out, and it's easy to go and check out what happens where. There are some other things about this game I will show you when I show you the map in just a few moments. Anything else I wanted to say at the moment? Yeah, well, it's I must say I really enjoyed playing this game again. It has some really memorable locations, monsters, pictures, not least as well. The very nice art style by Russ Nicholson, of course, in this one, which is one of the things I think that made this book. I mean, if this book had come out and there were no illustrations inside, I don't think it would have been as big a hit as it was. It may still have worked, but I think it would have been much more of a sort of slow start for the genre, and maybe somebody would have thought that, oh, what if we add illustrations? No, the illustrations really make a big difference, and they're quite vivid and fascinating. So, I quite like the vampire bats there as well. So I'll get onto doing my screen now, so I can show you a little bit more. Let's see. Right, I'm not sure. Do I have to move anything? It doesn't look like I need to move so much. Right. So, okay. Just make sure I've got my yes. Right. So now I'm also recording my screen. I'll just move this up a little bit. Okay. So. Right, so okay. Right, so here we have the map, and I'm just to zoom out a little bit more now, just so we can see the overall structure. So the beginning of the map, of course, this is the top here is the beginning of the game, and then you're moving downwards on this map, and of course downwards is now north. Normally I would have wanted to map this from the bottom up, because that's what feels the most natural to me when I do these games, but when I use Twine, it automatically starts at the top and then moves downwards, so it's easier just to try to maintain that. What I have done in this nodal flowchart map is I have tried to maintain directions properly most of the time. So if you go, of course, north is down, so south is up, which means west is to the right and east is to the left. In the beginning, it's fairly linear for a little while, and then you get to a portcullis, which sort of blocks your path and you can't go back, which, well, of course, you wouldn't be able to go back anyway, since it's a sort of a linear choose your own path book. But I suppose it just felt right for them to do that, because then you wouldn't sort of, as a reader, think, oh, but I want to go back and have a look again. No, you can't do that. So I think that's fair enough. I think it's a nice little way to do it, to sort of make it feel like in an even more open world, this is what you would have done. You wouldn't have gone back because you couldn't. So when you get to the middle section here, excuse me, I'll just zoom in a bit more now. When you get to the middle section, there are 3 distinct paths you can take, all with their own interesting bits and bobs. And this is where I think one needs to play it through at least 3 times and do the different paths just to see what there is in the different ones. One of them is the correct one for winning the game. The others are still very interesting. So there's an eastern path over here, there's a middle path down here, and then there's a western path here. And then they all, and of course there's some interesting caves here as well. There's sort of, and then they all get to the river, and there's 2 places you can approach the river. There's one quite a bit upstream, and of course if you get there, you have to swim down the river, and then you actually get onto the same side of the river, the southern side. And all things, they converge in number 218 there, which is the river bank, where you have a few different options of crossing the river. There's a bridge, there's a bell we can ring for the ferryman, and there is also a boat you can just sort of take and try to get it to cross. All these ones are quite tricky. In fact, there's quite an interesting thing here, because if you want to use the ferry service, which is the safest thing and the most reliable thing, the only way to have enough gold at that point is to do one specific battle in the beginning. That is a little bit tricky. Not very tricky, actually. It's still very doable, but it's I'm not entirely sure whether doing that and then crossing with a ferry service is the safest thing to do, but I still think that might be the case. So if you do the ferry, of course, it's very safe to cross. Otherwise, you might bump into crocodiles and piranhas and things like that, as I mentioned earlier when I was reading out that paragraph for you. In fact, when you see here on my map, you might see it's at 350 A, B, and C as well, because it's easier for me to flowchart the course of events there if I split it into several paragraphs. So you converge again on the other side of the river, number 7 there, and then you get across. And at this point, actually, just to say something about the correct path here, spoilers, of course, but of course, if you've been watching these videos, you would have known something already. There's one of the correct keys is in the very beginning. And the second correct key is on one of the paths, of course, in the middle. The right one, or the eastern one. But after that, you can actually choose your own route entirely. Once you get past finding the second key, the second correct key, you can just do whatever you like. Which means there are actually a few different interesting paths to take across the river as well. There's one involves finding a key to a boathouse and then going through the boathouse, and the other one involves going into a room where you go into some kind of trap and you're hit on the head and you wake up somewhere else, which is why you've got this long arrow on the side here, because that's like a shortcut through. So you can see that's actually quite a bit you're skipping if you don't go in there and you get the key to the boathouse, which is some tricky battles, but and then you get all this bit here and you go all the way down here. But of course, just as eventful, you can see it's just about the same number of paragraphs, is the other way. It's just you're skipping in the beginning and then you are moving on to these things happening here. And then they all converge again at number 89, which is not very long before you get to the maze of Zagor. And then it's a little bit heading for the maze, and then once you are in the maze, this is the maze here, and this would have been a lot easier to map out if it had been a sort of a normal floor plan map. The reason it looks so messy is because it's a flowchart map, and very often turning back is a different paragraph number than excuse me, turning back is a different paragraph number than where you're going because it gives you the right directions in the paragraph. Searching for secret passages is a different paragraph to actually being at the end of a corridor or in the corridor. And of course, finding a secret passage is another paragraph again, and then it takes you to another corridor that you might get to somewhere else. And also, if you search for secret passages and in a place where there isn't any, sometimes you are taken to a random monster encounter. I think this is actually a really genius design, this maze, because it's not linear. It's completely non-linear in a way, because you can go in any direction. Many of these places you can go in circles. If you don't map it out, you might actually just be walking around for a while, and you just sort of until you actually remember some of the places you haven't been, because you sort of think to yourself, "Oh, have I been to 246? No, I haven't been to 246, have I?" Things like that. So, and some interesting things as well. It actually confuses you a bit, and I think it's quite clever. There are some really long arrows here going to 161, which is the one where you meet a random monster. Then there are also some other long arrows, and some of these are what happens when you are, for instance, given directions and you try to take a shortcut. Other ones are places where you go into some kind of trap again. These are quite non-lethal, by the way. They just transport you to somewhere else in the labyrinth. But in this maze here, there's two things. It's very safe to walk around, actually. You can't really die here so much. There's two things you have to do in the maze, and one of them is to get the correct key, which is the last key, and you have to find the exit. So the exit isn't hard to find if you keep walking around for long enough. If you do it in a structured manner and you actually try to make a map, it might be a bit sooner. And then it goes off here. This is the exit from the maze, and then you're taking into the dragon's cave. And because the dragon can be a difficult encounter, and so can the minotaur that you find in the maze as well. I used to say minotaur, but now I'm saying minotaur. I just realized I did that the other day. I think minotaur is probably more historically accurate, because in Greek, of course, it's minotauros. So minotaur, that's just an amplification of the I, which sometimes would be pronounced I in English rather than E in Greek. So it should really be minotaur, but yeah, okay, that's just an aside. So you get to the dragon's cave, and of course, the dragon is another hard battle to win. There is a way to make it easier, of course, if you've picked up some interesting items on the way. Maybe learn to spell. And then you get to the next bit, which is the encounter with Zagor himself. And of course, there too, there are some different options. But of course, the easiest way to kill him is one that you really served on a silver plate or an iron plate. In that you actually have the means to kill him in one of the locations where you also get the correct key. So maybe those two things should have been put in different places, as in a way it makes it a little bit easier. I know that's the monster you have to kill to get the key and the means to kill Zagor. It's quite a hard monster to kill. It's quite a challenging thing. If you don't have the right stats for it, that might be where you die. But if you make that, then that was your hardest battle. Well, apart from the dragon, potentially. So if you defeat Zagor, if you actually have found the spell to defeat the dragon, or if you've some other means of defeating the dragon, and if you have the means to kill Zagor without actually battling him, then of course your last combat is actually the Minotaur in the maze. Or last proper rolling dice battle. Right, and once you've defeated Zagor, then the real challenge begins, because this is where which path you took becomes more relevant. Getting to actually go and kill Zagor isn't that hard, I would say. But the tricky bit is having picked up the right keys. So this is quite decorative little thing here is when you get to the treasure chest and you have all the 14 different combinations of keys. And of course right there in the middle I also put 192, the orphan paragraph as well. Right. so right, just had to restart my camera there. Okay, so 14 different combinations, and of course now it shows that 2 of them are correct, but of course 192 doesn't. There's no such combination of keys, and so that's just there just for completing the map with all the paragraphs in the book. And it takes you to 400. So if you follow the right path, I think you might end up with, well, you could end up with one. Let's see. I don't think you can end up with more than one key that isn't right. Let's see. If I now do, let's do key here now. Okay, so now in yellow it shows where locations of keys. And let's see. I see. Yes. So actually. If you take the correct path and you have the right keys, you could potentially have one wrong key, so you would still be able to make it. You would lose a bit of stamina, so hopefully you'd have some left. Another thing about this game, by the way, in the beginning you're given the choice of 3 different potions: potion of luck, potion of stamina, potion of skill. Skill replenishes your skill to the maximum. Absolutely pointless in this game because you can't lose it much. And you gain lots of skill at lots of places. Potion of luck, we don't need that so much either. There's luck points all over the place. I will say something about that, by the way. In the other game books of fighting fantasy I have played, luck is a very precious ability. There are several luck throws you have to make, and they make a difference between life and death. In this book, not so much. The luck here seems to, maybe this is what they thought when they started writing the first book as well. They weren't thinking so much of luck in terms of doing tricky things that could go either way. I mean, most of the occasions where you would use luck in later books, in this one, you use skill. Actually, you test against skill. So luck in this book is almost entirely left for using in combat. And I'll show you when I do my simulation how much of an effect that can have on the outcome if you use it properly in combat. Because you gain luck points all over the place when you defeat difficult monsters, you can use a bit of luck as well in battles. So that's keys. Let's just show. So this is the correct path here now. Well, the easiest path, I would say. I mean, there's more than one correct path because of the way it's structured. And also this is the shortest route through the maze. I can zoom in a bit. Actually, I'll zoom out a bit there. Okay. Other interesting things. So places where you can die. So there are very few places, I told you, there are no real insta-deaths in the normal sense. I mean, you have to still fail at something. You have to make some wrong decisions and roll some bad dice, usually, before you can die. So there's the encounter with the vampire, there's the encounter with the ghoul, both of which can kill you. Then there is not having keys is the end of the game, and not using any of the right keys is the end of the game, and of course not having the correct combination of keys really is the end of the game before you get to 400. So there's very few places you can end this game. So it's quite interesting how this game is structured so that you are almost guaranteed to get to the end game, at least. Anything else interesting I wanted to show you? I can't think of anything at the moment now that I wanted to show you here. So let's just look at the simulation. So let's see. Right, so because I reused a lot of the code I used to my previous one, I think I've sort of established a reasonably good system now. There was one thing I had to change because as I said earlier, the previous books I've been playing, luck has been a very precious resource and really should be reserved for those occasions when it actually will save your life. Whereas in this one, you really want to be using it in combat, and And so I had to make a new kind of routine for how to use lock in combat. And I was trying different things. And of course, I'm not going to write a sort of full artificial intelligence thing, so I just have to make a simple algorithm for it. And what I decided on, because there's two things lock can do in combat. It can increase the damage you do to the monsters you fight by 2, or it can reduce the damage done to you by 1. And because it increases the damage done to monsters more than you regain or prevent from yourself, when you choose which way to use it, you really have to sort of think about how likely it is in a combat that the monster will injure you rather than the other way around. And so after trying a few different things, I decided that my routine will compare the monster skill to the hero skill. And if the monster has 2 higher skill than you, so say we got skill 10, the monster has 12, then you will be in defense mode, and it will try to reduce injury done to you. And if it's 1 more, or it's the same or less than what you have, then it will be in extra damage mode, and it will try to do extra damage to you. Also, because of the way it works, if you fail the luck roll, you take extra damage if you're in defense mode, and you do less damage if you are in sort of your luck attacker mode, as it were. And so if you want to have the best possible chances of making it, so I also put into the routine, if your luck is less than 7, you shouldn't test for luck. And then for each combat, I had a variable that says how many times should I test for luck in this particular battle, and that is sort of partly based on how difficult the battle is, and partly based on what luck points you're going to pick up afterwards. And of course, in the last battle, that you need to do if you follow the easiest path, which is the Minotaur, you just use the rest of your luck down to 7. You don't want to go below 7 because you make it harder for yourself. So there are actually very few significant events in this book. Significant events, by that I mean things that need to be simulated because it has an effect on your chances of winning. So there's a luck test, there's a fight with some orcs, there's a snake, there's some more orcs, there's the Iron Cyclops, a barbarian, a were-rat, a zombie leader, some other zombies, Minotaur, and that's it. It's very few events. There's fewer than there are in the other books I've done. What else is there to say about this? Yeah, another thing, of course, just like in my last book, I had to make a routine for eating provisions. In this book, you can't just eat provisions anywhere. In Caverns of the Snow Witch, you can eat it anywhere, but in this one, you're told you may now eat provisions, and which makes it easier, I think, for me as well, too, because I can know exactly where I'm putting that into my routine. And of course, again, I base that on I sort of have a target number of stamina relative to your initial stamina that you're going for, based on how much stamina you might be able to get afterwards, or whether there's a battle coming up, things like that. And of course, you have potions in this game, potion of skill, stamina, or luck. There's no point doing the luck or skill, as I've pointed out before. So a stamina potion, and in this one you have an entire 2 sips of potion, which means you can twice increase your stamina back to the initial value, which is ridiculous, I think, and it makes it too easy. But and also, every time you're in battle, I check if you need to use a stamina potion to stay alive. And also, there's another point where you lose some stamina that I do a check right here in the middle here as well. Right, so I think I've said enough about that, and I'll just run this now. So I'll just make this a bit... I'll just make it a bit bigger like that. Oh, hang on, that's too big. because now it just went outside of the boundary box for the screen grab video, because my screen is 1920 by 1200, and of course the video is 1920 by 1080. So right, so skill. So let's just start with the maximum now. So 12 skill, 24 stamina, and let's see, 12 luck gives you a winning chance of 99.99%, and that is a new record. You are actually practically 100% likely to win this game if you have maximum stats. That's pretty good. So let's see. Normally you sort of think, okay, which ability now is the most important one? Let's just see what happens if you do 12 skill still, but you do minimum stamina and 12 luck. 99.99% still. I mean, skill is of course very important. So, and because you have a stamina potion, and provisions, you got so much stamina that you can fill up as well. What about 12, 14, and 7? Okay, so it goes down a little bit if you're just from not having so much luck, because then you don't have any luck to use in combat. But if you got skill 12, you don't need luck in combat, apparently. So 12, 14, 7, 99.97%. That is quite incredible. And if you remember my Caverns of the Snow Witch one, that's sort of the... it may look easy if you have maximum abilities, but it goes down really quickly. This one does not. So what about 11 skill, 24 stamina, and 12 luck? Because skill is usually the one that, see, that's still 99.99%. 14 and 7? 98.64. So you see 11 and 12 skill, almost no difference. And if you have 11 or 12 skill, it does not matter what other abilities you have. What if you go down to 10? This should start, yeah, okay, 99.97, but if I do, 10, 14, 7, 84.47%, still really good odds of making it. And of course, as I have to reiterate, of course, this is if you know the optimum path, which will require several playthroughs and a bit of mapping and things like that. But I think if you want to play this game, you really want to play it several times. You don't want to play it just once. If you do play these games just once, you miss out a lot of good and interesting stuff. So, so 10, skill 10, you still got really good chances of winning. But what about 9? This should go down a bit now. Well, 99.48, but this should be more elastic for changes in stamina and luck. See, there we have it. So once you get to skill 9, stamina and luck becomes more important. Let's just see. So let's see. So see luck, because we're using luck in combat now, it makes a difference between 41.5% and 74.29%. So that's how important luck is. Let's go down to 8 now. And still max stamina and luck, and we're down to 73%. But this would be even more different when I... Yeah, see, it's once I go... So once you get to 8 skill, stamina and luck becomes even more important. So let's see, something like 8, 14, 12 maybe. That's if you're really lucky. 15, see, it doesn't go up that high. What about 8, 24, 7? See, that gives us a really good one. See, the stamina is really good because it compensates for a lot of lack in other abilities. What about minimum abilities? So if you're really unlucky, of course you wouldn't keep those if you rolled that, would you? But at 0.11%, you still can win it. What about average abilities? So of course you are most likely to get sort of a 9, so 12, so 19, and 10, for instance, very average, 88%. So even if you do completely random rolls for your skill, stamina, and luck, and if you get average or above, and you follow the right path, you are extremely likely to win the game. So this is a very nice. It's a very nice game. It's a nice sort of entry level game into the genre. It's not too harsh, not too brutal. It's not you sort of turn, you walk across the bridge, and then it just says, "Oh, the bridge collapses, you die." The end. It's a bit more. It's a bit more gentle. So there you have it. I don't know if there's anything else I need to say about this now. By far the easiest fighting fantasy game book to play. You don't really need to cheat in this one unless you really want to. I do recommend playing this properly several times, and also if when you get to the labyrinth, the maze of Zagor, don't be frustrated. Just try to draw a map, and it'll sort itself out easily. But as you saw in episode 1, when I was trying to draw my map in my sort of flowchart map, it was quite tricky to actually even make that work because I got transported to different locations a few times. I'm wondering, is there anything else I wanted to say about this game? Oh, got some nice lights going on here. I think that's about it. I played this for the first time now in a third of a century. I think it's a pretty good book still. It's holding up well. It's interesting to see how the style is a little bit inconsistent, and there might be some remnants of earlier ideas that disappeared on the editing floor, so to speak. And also the orphan paragraph mystery is quite interesting and intriguing as well. I really enjoyed this book. I think it's got some cracking good writing as well, some vivid descriptions that really give you the atmosphere. The artwork, of course, like in most of the fighting fantasy books, really adds to it. I think it's a masterpiece in a way because it was not just is it well done as a game. It's a bit easy, but it's well done as a game. It's entertaining. It's fun. It can be a bit scary as well. A bit gory. There's some really freaky encounters. There's some really vivid descriptions. It's a little bit of horror things going on as well in your encounters with because you do encounter Zager in a way before you get to the end. When you, for instance, when you find the room with the paintings, you actually get to encounter Zager in a way, and I think it's just very well made. So it's a really good version of itself. I mean, there is room for improvement. You could take this book now and you could sort of, based on what you know from later books, you could rewrite it a little bit and make it more streamlined, better structured, remove all the superfluous skill bonuses, maybe reduce the luck bonuses a little bit, and it would be a better game. But it does have its charm and of course those stylistic imperfections, as it were. I think they sort of add to it as well. A little bit. So yeah, I don't think there's much else to say about it. It's a classic. If you haven't played it before, play it. If you've only played it once or twice, play it again. And also, I think one of the things they do make it in this book is made in a way that makes it easy to map. And if you play this book, make your own map. It's enjoyable. It's fun. And it also makes it so much easier to find out where you haven't been and where you need to search in order to get to the end and with the right keys. So yeah, it's still one of my favorites, I think, even though I haven't played that many yet. Next week, well, I'll say next week. This week, when I make my next episode, I will start on Fighting Fantasy Game Book number 2, which is one I haven't played before. The Citadel of Chaos. Which I've got here in the Star cover version. Which has magic and spells and stuff, which is a bit unique, I think. There aren't that many of the Fighting Fantasy books, I think, that has a magic system. So that will be interesting and a bit different to what I am used to. So I'm really looking forward to that, and I hope you're looking forward to that as well. And I'm sorry this got a bit long because I I had to sort of say quite a bit about the some of the things that I noticed in this book. It's not a proper review per se, because I really want to keep playing all of these books, and then when I've done all of them, I'll just say something about each one in turn later. And there was one more thing I wanted to say now. I can't remember what it is now. And of course, I'll do a sort of a rundown of which book is the easiest to win. But of course, I don't think that's important. I mean, there are so many ways to play these books. One of the people commenting on my channel, I just didn't even think this was a thing, but it makes so much sense. He played the books because he wanted to get the maximum loot possible. So that's what he thought was great. And in that case, I think that Ian Livingstone probably is his favorite. Should really be his favorite writer, because he likes his loot as well. Certainly, it seems that he thinks that should be the main motivation for any kind of self-proclaimed hero, is to try to find as much loot as possible. I always find that a bit weird. I want to be a hero in the sense that I want to. So basically, when I get to the end of this book and I don't have the right keys, I feel happy that if I killed Zagor, I think, "Ooh, that's great! I won the game. I didn't get the treasure, but hey ho, doesn't matter. I saved the world." That's more important than money, isn't it? And obviously, you didn't get enough money because you keep going on adventures all the time. So, more than 60 of them, in fact. Well, anyway. So yeah, Steve Jackson's Citadel of Chaos coming up soon. It'll be interesting because this will also be the first time I read a book that is written entirely by Steve Jackson. And for some reason, I think I like his stuff better than Ian Livingstone's. I'm not sure. I think I like both of them for different reasons. But yeah, Steve Jackson's, he's got some interesting ideas. I'm actually still really looking forward to getting to things like House of Hell and Creature of Havoc as well. That will be interesting, very different. And also, I'm really looking forward to, that'll be a long time yet, to getting to later books like Howl of the Werewolf. I know that's neither Steve Jackson nor Ian Livingstone, but yeah, it'll be really good. So yes, without much further ado, there's been a lot of ado already. Thank you for your patience in watching this video. If you've been with me the whole time through, sorry for all my rambling. I hope some of you actually enjoy the rambling. If you do, please leave a comment. If you don't enjoy the rambling and you got to this far, you probably shouldn't comment, because you might not have something nice to say. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you next time and to playing a new game book with you guys. And yeah, that's it for now. And yeah, thanks for watching, and goodbye for now.